Tonight is not just another night. What happens in your bedroom when the lights go out may be deciding more than your rest. There is a reason anxiety waits for silence, why heaviness appears when you lie down, and why peace feels contested after dark. This is not random. Something targets the night because the night exposes authority. And one simple act of obedience tonight can quietly shut a door you did not even realize was open. The bedroom is not a neutral space. It is a spiritual environment where vulnerability, rest, and unseen influence intersect, making it a primary point of alignment or disruption. It is the one place where the external world fades and the internal world becomes louder. Here, titles fall away, responsibilities pause, and the mind is no longer occupied with performance. What remains is the unfiltered state of the soul. Thoughts that were suppressed during the day surface. Fears that were managed through activity find room to speak. Hopes, regrets, memories, and unanswered questions all converge when the body finally slows down. This makes the bedroom a place of exposure, not weakness, but openness, where defenses are naturally lowered and the inner life becomes most active. Because rest requires surrender, the bedroom becomes a space where control is released. Sleep itself is an act of trust, whether conscious or not. You stop managing, stop monitoring, stop guarding with effort, and wherever surrender exists, influence seeks access. This is why unrest so often waits until night. Anxiety that remains quiet during busy hours suddenly finds volume in the dark. Heaviness presses when distractions are gone. The absence of noise does not create these things, it reveals them. The bedroom does not cause struggle, it exposes what has already been lingering beneath the surface. Rest is never just physical. The body may lie down, but the mind and spirit continue to process. The bedroom becomes a processing chamber where the soul replays the day and anticipates tomorrow. What has been allowed into the heart finds space to settle here. Peace deepens or unrest multiplies. This is why the environment matters, not just materially, but spiritually. Atmospheres are shaped by what is permitted to dwell there. Thoughts repeated, emotions entertained, fears indulged, and truths remembered all leave an imprint. Over time, these imprints shape how the space feels, how rest is experienced, and how easily peace is accessed. The unseen operates most effectively where awareness is lowest. Night does not create vulnerability, it reveals it. When vigilance fades, access points become clearer. This is why spiritual struggle often intensifies when the lights go out, not because darkness has power, but because stillness removes distraction. In that stillness, influence becomes more noticeable. This is also why restoration often begins in private spaces rather than public ones. Alignment is established where the soul is most honest, not where appearances are maintained. The bedroom becomes a point of alignment when authority is recognized there. What governs the unseen environment determines whether rest restores or drains. When peace is established, sleep becomes restorative rather than shallow. When order is present, the mind quiets without force. But when alignment is disrupted, rest becomes contested, and even long hours in bed fail to restore strength. This is not accidental. The state of rest affects clarity, discernment, resilience, and emotional stability. What happens at night shapes the capacity of the day. Because of this, the bedroom functions as a gateway rather than a backdrop. It is where internal battles are either reinforced or resolved. What is acknowledged there carries forward into waking life. When alignment is restored in that space, its effects ripple outward, influencing mood, decisions, patience, and perspective. The bedroom is not simply where the body sleeps. It is where the soul exhales, where influence is either permitted or restricted, and where peace is either defended or diminished. God often issues precise instructions during the night because night exposes vulnerability, lowers defenses, and reveals where authority must be reestablished before damage escalates. When activity slows and the noise of the day fades, the true condition of the inner life becomes visible. The mind no longer hides behind busyness, and the heart is not distracted by obligation. In the quiet, unresolved thoughts surface. Emotions that were managed during the day rise to awareness, and areas of weakness become evident. Night does not create these conditions. It simply removes the cover that daylight provides. This exposure is not meant to shame, but to reveal where restoration is needed. At night, the body rests, but the soul remains attentive. Defenses that rely on effort and awareness naturally weaken. This is not a flaw, it is the design of rest. Yet where defense is lower, access points appear. Anxiety often waits until night to speak because it finds fewer barriers. Fear negotiates more easily when fatigue sets in. Heaviness presses when the mind is no longer occupied. These are not random experiences. They indicate areas where authority has been challenged quietly over time. God speaks into these moments not as a reaction, but as a preventative act, addressing vulnerability before it hardens into damage. Precision matters because authority operates through order. God does not give vague direction when alignment is required. He speaks clearly, often simply because clarity closes gaps. The enemy exploits ambiguity, delay, and confusion. Night is when these tactics are most effective, which is why God intervenes there. Instructions given in the dark are not about fear, but about reclaiming ground before erosion spreads. What begins as restlessness can become exhaustion. What begins as unease can become anxiety. God interrupts early because prevention is an expression of care. Night also strips away performance. There is no audience, no affirmation, no recognition. Obedience offered at night is free from appearance and rooted in trust. This gives it weight. Acting when no one sees and no immediate result is felt establishes authority in a way that daytime obedience often does not. It declares alignment without the need for validation. God honors this kind of response because it is untainted by ego and driven by reliance rather than understanding. Many significant spiritual moments occur at night because night heightens sensitivity. With fewer distractions, awareness sharpens. The heart listens more closely. This makes night an ideal time for instruction, not because people are stronger then, but because they are more honest. God does not wait until damage is visible to intervene. He addresses the unseen trajectory. Authority must be reestablished at the point where access is being tested, not after consequences appear. Delayed obedience weakens momentum. Night instructions often carry urgency because timing protects alignment. Morning brings noise, logic, and rationalization. The simplicity of night obedience preserves trust. God speaks when the window is open. Before hesitation complicates response. Immediate alignment shuts doors quietly, without confrontation, without struggle. Night instructions also restore rest. When authority is reestablished, peace follows naturally. The mind quiets not through effort, but through order. Sleep becomes deeper because resistance. CE has been removed. God desires rest because rest sustains clarity, strength, and discernment. By issuing precise instructions at night, He guards the foundation of endurance. Ultimately, night instruction is an act of protection. It secures territory before it is lost, restores authority before confusion takes root, and establishes peace before fear multiplies. God speaks in the night not because darkness has power, but because alignment gained there carries into the day, shaping outcomes long before they are visible. Obedience in physical placement releases spiritual authority. What is placed in alignment with God's instruction marks territory, establishes order, and restricts unauthorized access in the unseen. From the beginning, God has worked through tangible acts to produce spiritual outcomes, not because physical objects hold power on their own, but because obedience expressed through action creates agreement. Humans live in the physical realm, and God often meets humanity at that intersection where faith moves from belief into behavior. Placement becomes a declaration, a visible response to an invisible instruction. And that response carries authority. Throughout Scripture, moments of protection, deliverance, and transition were often tied to specific acts carried out in specific places. These acts were not symbolic gestures meant to comfort the mind. They were acts of alignment that established order. When something is placed intentionally, it defines space. It declares ownership. It communicates governance. In the unseen realm, space is never neutral. What is undefined remains vulnerable. What is unmarked remains open. Placement closes what ambiguity leaves exposed. Authority operates through order, and order begins when boundaries are established. Physical placement draws those boundaries. It signals that a space has been acknowledged and claimed. The CT itself may appear simple, even insignificant, but obedience is rarely loud. Its strength lies in precision, not drama. The unseen responds to alignment, not explanation. When God instructs placement, He is not asking for understanding, He is calling for agreement. Agreement activates authority immediately. Unauthorized access thrives where permission is unclear. Spiritual intrusion often operates subtly, not through force, but through neglect, distraction, or delay. When obedience defines a space, access is restricted. The unseen recognizes markers of authority even when the visible world does not, just as legal boundaries matter. Regardless of whether they are noticed, spiritual boundaries function whether they are felt or not. Placement establishes jurisdiction. Objects themselves are not the source of power. They are points of contact. They occupy space and stand as witnesses to obedience. Their presence is not active through motion or speech, but through continuity. What stands remains. This continuity matters because authority is not momentary. Once established, it holds position. What is placed continues to declare alignment long after the action is complete. Physical placement also confronts passivity. It requires movement, decision, and follow-through. Faith that remains internal does not define space. Obedience that moves into action does. This is why placement is often required rather than intention alone. Intention without action leaves authority unexpressed. Action aligned with instruction makes authority visible in the unseen. God uses physical placement because it engages trust. The mind may not fully understand the reason, but the act itself says, I trust your instruction more than my logic. This surrender releases governance. The enemy resists authority but cannot argue with alignment. When order is restored, confusion loses leverage. When bound, boundaries are drawn, intrusion becomes illegal. Placement also brings accountability. Once a space is marked, it is no longer overlooked. Awareness increases. Agreement is maintained. The act of placing creates a reference point that reinforces alignment over time. It reminds the individual that the space has been intentionally governed, not casually occupied. Ultimately, obedience in physical placement is not about ritual, it is about jurisdiction. It declares who governs the space. It removes ambiguity. It establishes peace by restoring order. When God instructs placement, He is not introducing superstition. He is reestablishing authority. And where authority is recognized, access is controlled, peace is protected, and alignment is sustained even in silence. Rest is protected territory, not passive downtime. It is not simply the absence of activity, but a state in which strength is restored, clarity is renewed, and discernment is sharpened. When rest is intact, the mind processes clearly, the emotions stabilize, and the spirit regains resilience. Rest sustains endurance. It prepares a person to respond rather than react. Because of this, rest is never ignored by the unseen. It is guarded or contested depending on who holds authority over it. When rest is disturbed, the effects extend far beyond fatigue. Strength weakens first, not always physically, but internally. Patience shortens, emotional tolerance decreases, small issues feel heavier than they are. Clarity fades as the mind becomes crowded with unresolved thoughts. Discernment weakens because exhaustion blurs perception. Decisions become reactive instead of grounded. This slow erosion often goes unnoticed because it happens incrementally. Restlessness becomes familiar. Shallow sleep feels normal. Waking tired becomes expected. But normalization of unrest is a warning sign that territory has been contested. The enemy targets the night because night governs the foundation of the day. A disrupted night weakens the capacity of the morning. Fatigue clouds judgment. Anxiety increases vulnerability. Fear negotiates more easily when the mind is tired. The enemy does not need to create chaos if he can simply interfere with rest. A weary person is easier to confuse, easier to pressure, and easier to distract. This is why night is strategic, not because darkness has power, but because fatigue lowers resistance. God guards rest intentionally because rest fuels obedience, wisdom, and stability. Throughout Scripture, rest is treated as sacred, not optional. God models rest not out of need, but to establish rhythm. Rest creates space for reflection, recalibration, and renewal. It is where the soul regains alignment. When rest is protected, the individual remains anchored even when circumstances are demanding. God understands that without rest, even truth becomes harder to hold on to. Night also strips away distractions. The silence exposes what has been carried all day. Thoughts replay, emotions surface. This exposure is why rest can feel vulnerable. But vulnerability is not weakness, it is openness. And openness requires protection. God guards rest because it is where internal work happens quietly. Strength is rebuilt in hidden ways. Discernment is restored beneath awareness. God often works while the body sleeps, but his work requires a guarded environment. Disturbed rest is often a sign of misalignment rather than mere tiredness. When authority is challenged, peace becomes elusive. The mind struggles to settle. Sleep becomes shallow. Dreams feel heavy. These are not always natural patterns. They can indicate that rest has become contested ground. God addresses this by restoring order, not by forcing sleep, but by reestablishing authority over the space and timing of rest. Rest is protected territory because it sustains long-term stability. A person can endure pressure for a season, but without rest, collapse becomes inevitable. God intervenes not only to provide relief, but to prevent breakdown. Guarding the night protects the future. It preserves clarity before confusion takes root. It restores strength before exhaustion deepens. Ultimately, rest is an act of trust. To sleep is to release control. God honors this surrender by providing covering. When rest is guarded, peace becomes natural rather than forced. Strength returns without striving. Discernment sharpens without effort. God does not guard rest to limit activity, but to sustain purpose. Because a rested soul resists deception, recognizes truth, and remains steady even when pressure increases. Authority is restored through simple, timely obedience, not emotion, ritual, or understanding. Alignment matters more than explanation. An immediate response closes access points created by delay. Authority does not emerge from intensity of feeling or depth of insight, but from agreement expressed through action. Many assume that understanding must come before obedience, yet spiritual authority often flows in the opposite direction. Obedience establishes order first, and understanding follows later, if it comes at all. This is because authority operates independently of human comprehension. It responds to alignment, not analysis. Emotion is unreliable as a foundation for authority because emotion fluctuates. Fear, excitement, confidence, or doubt rise and fall with circumstance. Authority, however, must remain stable to be effective. Ritual alone also fails when it is disconnected from obedience. Repetition without alignment becomes hollow. Action without instruction lacks direction. God restores authority through simplicity because simplicity removes distortion. When instruction is clear and response is immediate, alignment is clean. There is no space for overthinking, no room for hesitation to erode resolve. Delay is rarely neutral. It creates gaps where access can form. What is postponed often becomes negotiated. The mind begins to question timing, relevance, or necessity. This questioning weakens momentum. Authority depends on timing as much as it depends on action. An instruction acted on immediately carries a different weight than one revisited later. Immediate obedience signals trust. It declares that God's voice is sufficient without confirmation. This posture restores authority because it places governance back where it belongs. Understanding can become a barrier when it is treated as a prerequisite. The desire to know why often disguises a reluctance to act. Yet authority does not wait for clarity. It is activated through response. Many spiritual struggles persist, not because instruction was absent, but because response was delayed. Delay leaves doors ajar. It allows uncertainty to linger and influence to press. Immediate obedience closes those doors quietly, without confrontation, without force. Simple obedience disarms complexity. Complexity benefits confusion. The enemy thrives where action is postponed by overanalysis. Simplicity frustrates these strategies. When a person responds promptly to instruction, time is removed from the equation. There is no opportunity for doubt to multiply. Authority is restored swiftly because alignment is established before resistance can organize. Authority is not restored through performance. It does not require dramatic gestures or visible intensity. Often it is established through small, precise acts carried out quietly. These acts may feel insignificant, but their power lies in accuracy. Precision matters more than scale. God restores authority through exact obedience because exact obedience reestablishes order. Order removes confusion. Where confusion is removed, intrusion loses leverage. Timely obedience also reinforces trust. Each immediate response strengthens alignment. Over time, this creates a pattern where authority remains intact rather than repeatedly reclaimed. Authority that must be constantly fought for was never fully established. Authority restored through alignment stands without effort. It does not argue, it does not explain. It simply governs. Understanding may come later, but it is not required for authority to function. Trust fills the gap where explanation is absent. This trust invites covering. When alignment is established quickly, peace follows naturally. Not because circumstances change instantly, but because access has been restricted. Authority restored through obedience alters trajectory even before results appear. Ultimately, simple, timely obedience is powerful because it is uncontaminated by ego, fear, or control. It places governance back into God's hands. Alignment replaces striving. Response replaces hesitation. And authority is restored not through force, but through agreement expressed in action. Rest is protected territory, not passive downtime. It is not merely the absence of work or the pause between responsibilities. Rest is a state where strength is restored, clarity is renewed, and discernment is sharpened. Because of this, rest carries strategic value. When rest is compromised, everything that flows from it weakens. The body may continue functioning, but the soul begins to operate at a deficit. Decision-making becomes clouded. Emotional resilience thins. Patience shortens. This is why rest is targeted, not randomly disrupted. The night becomes contested, because what happens there determines capacity for the day. When rest is disturbed, strength erodes quietly. Fatigue is not always physical exhaustion. Often it is the result of unrest, shallow sleep, or mental agitation that prevents true recovery. A weakened state makes resistance harder. Clarity fades when the mind does not reset. Thoughts loop instead of resolving. Small problems feel heavier. Discernment dulls when the soul has not had space to recalibrate. This creates vulnerability not because of failure, but because of depletion. The enemy does not need dramatic access when erosion can accomplish the same goal gradually. Night is targeted because defense is naturally lower. Vigilance gives way to surrender. Control is released. This is not a flaw, it is necessary for rest. But where surrender exists, protection must also exist. Without protection, surrender becomes exposure. God guards the night intentionally because He understands the value of rest and the cost of its disruption. He knows that a rested soul resists deception more easily, responds with wisdom more consistently, and carries strength without strain. Rest is also where internal alignment is reinforced. The mind processes unresolved matters. The heart integrates truth. The spirit recalibrates. If this process is interrupted repeatedly, imbalance accumulates. Over time, unrest becomes familiar. Sleep loses depth. Peace feels distant. God does not ignore this erosion. He addresses it by restoring order, not by demanding effort. True rest cannot be forced. It must be protected. God guards rest because it fuels obedience. Weariness weakens response. Fatigue creates hesitation. Confusion grows when the soul is depleted. By protecting rest, God protects clarity. By restoring peace at night, He strengthens decision-making by day. The enemy seeks to disturb rest because unrest creates noise, and noise drowns discernment. God counters this by establishing authority where rest occurs. Rest is not inactivity. It is preparation. It is the space where strength is renewed before engagement resumes. When rest is guarded, resilience increases. When it is attacked, life becomes reactive rather than intentional. God's intention is not merely that you sleep, but that you recover. Recovery restores capacity. Capacity sustains purpose. This is why God treats rest as territory. What governs rest governs strength. What governs strength influences outcome. When rest is restored and guarded, clarity returns naturally. Discernment sharpens without strain. Strength becomes sustainable rather than forced. God does not protect rest out of sentiment, but because rest is foundational. A guarded night produces a grounded day, and a grounded day resists what unrest invites. Rest is not passive. It is defended because it sustains everything that follows.